Caught my girlfriend cheating with a criminal. I gathered evidence and turned him into the cops. I caught my girlfriend cheating with a criminal, gathered evidence, turned him into the cops, and ended up getting both of them locked up. My story is long, but tragically true, and I wouldn't wish my experience on anyone, not even the ones I decided to take revenge on. I'll have to admit and talk about some things I'd rather keep to myself and that I'm not proud of. I was 19 when my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Life got really tough. My mom worked from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and I took on the responsibility of caring for my dad. After a long 4-year battle with the disease, he passed away after undergoing triple bypass heart surgery. My father's death completely changed my mother. I tried to stay strong for both of us. Those were very dark times, and they changed me completely. I stopped focusing on my studies, and my grades dropped. I also had to get a part-time job to support my mom because she was utterly devastated. Something shifted inside me. Before that, I had lived a fairly comfortable life and regularly attended church and youth events. But after my dad died, if I wanted to go to college, I had to pay for it myself. I couldn't get a student loan, and the need for money just kept growing. My minimum wage job wasn't enough to get out of that financial hole. A friend introduced me to substances. He said if I needed money, I could work for him and his friends. They were drug dealers, and soon I started delivering for them. After a few months, I saved up enough money. I earned what I needed to pay for college. By then, I was already a few years into college. I didn't buy fancy clothes or throw money around, try not to draw attention. I finished my bachelor's degree in 3 years, since I had a lot of free time. At first, I wanted to become a lawyer, but I had seen too many corrupt cops and officials through the drug trade. I studied law, but didn't plan to take the bar exam, because I wanted to become a paralegal, which I eventually did. If you don't know, paralegals are legal assistants in English-speaking countries. Paralegals don't have full law degrees, but assist lawyers and handle some of their tasks. In college, I reconnected with an old classmate named Rita. We had been close back in school. That's when I learned we had actually liked each other back then, but we'd both been too shy to admit it. Long story short, Rita and I became best friends. Our previous relationships had been total failures, especially mine. After that breakup, I was completely drained and thought I'd never be able to love again. I didn't date anyone for years on purpose. My ex, let's call her Becky, did some cruel and heartless things that led to our breakup. I had treated her well, pulled her out of an abusive relationship, never hurt her, and told her that no one deserved to be used like an object, but she left me heartbroken. Meeting Rita gave me hope, but at the same time made me realize all my past relationships had been doomed. Rita was the love of my life. We were made for each other. We took it slow at first. 2 years passed before I opened up to her completely. I told her everything about Becky, my father, and everything I'd gone through. She showed real empathy and compassion. We started sleeping together and soon became an official couple. She loved that I listened, was honest, and protective. She told me she loved me, and I said I loved her too. I never told her how I paid for college or the things I'd seen and done. She didn't need to know. I was afraid it would ruin what we had. We loved each other and were already talking about starting a family. A few months later, tragedy struck. My mom had a serious accident. A large shelving unit fell on her. Her injuries were severe, and neighbors who found her immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, they discovered multiple injuries and fractures. On top of that, doctors found a leaking heart valve. They ran more tests to see if it could be fixed. A week later, we got some good news. The valve could be replaced. But there was bad news too. During the tests, they discovered 5 small masses near her left kidney, highly likely to be cancerous. A biopsy confirmed that she had kidney cancer. My mom began treatment, and I knew I had to focus on her. Things with Rita were still great. We were already living together in a city about 50 kilometers away from my mom's home. When I told Rita about my mom's illness, she was supportive but also concerned, especially when I warned her we'd be seeing each other less. Rita assured me she wasn't going to pause our relationship and said she wanted to be there for me emotionally. I told her that if she ever felt like taking a break or developed feelings for someone else, she should just tell me. I'd understand. Rita promised me she valued what we had and that no one could ever replace me. My mom began chemotherapy. At first, The side effects weren't too bad. But by the second month, she started feeling weak and lost her appetite. Rita and I kept in touch every day. She always messaged me in the morning as soon as she woke up and asked how my mom was doing. We'd talk for hours at night before bed, telling each other how much we missed one another. We still met up and spent nights together about every other week, and during those times, everything felt normal. As my mom's condition worsened, I told Rita she could go out more often with friends and enjoy herself. When summer came, I knew she'd want to have fun, even without me. For me, summer was far from cheerful because of my mom's health. Rita started going out more, and I genuinely enjoyed hearing about the funny things she and her friends are doing. I was truly happy she wasn't cooped up just because of my situation. Every time I updated her about my mom, she expressed concern and sympathy. The chemo was killing the cancer, but it was also draining the life out of my mom. I realized it wasn't the cancer anymore, it was the treatment. I needed a break, so some of my mom's friends agreed to stay with her and give me some time off. I called Rita as I was arriving in her city. She gave me the address where she was hanging out with friends. When I got there, I saw most of her friends, whom I already knew. I walked through the house to the backyard and saw her sitting next to some guy. They were laughing and having fun with the group. She introduced me to him as her boyfriend. Let's call him Henry. He gave me a firm handshake and said, "Nice to meet you." I responded politely, though I instantly felt something was off about him. I think we all get those intuitive red flags when we meet sketchy people. Because of my criminal past, I immediately sensed something suspicious about Henry. He was new to their group, and no one, not even Rita, had known him for more than a couple of months. I want to emphasize this wasn't jealousy. I was fine with Rita having male friends, and I respected many of them. But something about Henry just didn't sit right with me. I tried to push those thoughts aside, assuming I was just being paranoid. I chatted with Rita and her friends, trying to take my mind off it. Meanwhile, I discreetly kept an eye on Henry, though I acted friendly toward him on the surface. That night, I stayed at Rita's place, and the next morning, I went back home. Over the next few weeks, my mom's condition kept getting worse, but Rita and I kept in touch daily, texting a lot, calling often. Looking back now, I realized that most of the effort to keep in touch was coming from me, but at the time I didn't think much of it. One day, some relatives offered to look after my mom so I could get some rest. I decided to see Rita and called her on the way. She told me which restaurant she and her friends were at, so I drove over. As I was parking, I saw Henry getting into a brand new black Buick and driving off. He didn't see me. He didn't know what my car looked like. Inside, Rita and her friends greeted me warmly, expressing sympathy and support. We had dinner, shared a few drinks, and then went back to her place for the night. Before bed, I casually asked why Henry had left before I got there. Rita said she didn't know. She wasn't even sure he'd been at the restaurant at all. The restaurant was in a small shopping center with a few other places around, so I figured maybe he was leaving one of those, and Rita and the others just didn't notice him. Anyway, I stayed the night, and in the morning, I headed back home. The next day, around noon, my mom's condition suddenly took a critical turn, and she was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. She had developed pneumonia, and the chemotherapy had left her so weak that she caught illnesses easily. She spent the next 3 weeks in the hospital, constantly on IVs and medications, but her condition only got worse. It was painful to watch her like that. Eventually, the doctors told me she had no more than a week left. I knew she didn't want to die in a cold hospital room, so with the staff's help, we arranged to bring her home for her final days. When everything was ready, we brought her back. Even though she was extremely weak, she was happy to be home again. We both knew the end was near. She was scared but told me I'd been strong for her. She said she was ready to go and see my dad again after so many years apart. I asked one of her friends from church to stay with her for a few hours, got in my car, and drove to Rita's without warning. I didn't call ahead because I was crying the whole drive. Seeing my mom suffer like that was unbearable. I knew I wouldn't be able to speak when I got there. Her death was so close. I truly believed Rita would be able to comfort me, say the right words. When I arrived at her house, I saw the black Buick parked behind her car, but I didn't think much of it. My mind was consumed by thoughts of my mom. I opened the kitchen door with the key Rita had given me. That's how we always entered each other's homes. Music was playing in the house, but I didn't pay much attention. I didn't see anyone in the living room or the backyard. As I walked down the hallway toward her bedroom, I heard noises. I froze and reached for the door handle, but stopped immediately when I realized they were intimate sounds. My heart sank even deeper. I slowly opened the door. I froze in place. They were both completely naked and going at it, completely unaware I was even there. My first instinct was to charge in and break Henry's nose with my forehead, but I knew I couldn't risk getting in trouble, not with my mom and my job on the line. Shaking with rage, I slowly backed out of the room, slipped through the back door, and got into my car. No one saw me. I just sat there, completely broken, tears streaming down my face. I stayed like that for half an hour before driving back to my mom's. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen. Everyone assumed my tears were only about my mom, and to a large extent, they were. But the betrayal I had just witnessed was so brutal and heartless that I couldn't even fully process it. I knew my mother was the priority, especially with so little time left, but I still felt deeply betrayed by Rita. A rage rose inside me that I had never felt before, even though life had given me many reasons to be angry. I thought about calling Rita and yelling at her, telling her exactly what I'd seen. But I realized that if she had it in her to cheat on me while my mom was dying, no amount of yelling would make a difference. I made sure my mom was comfortable and tried to sleep in my old childhood room. I cried, drifted off, woke up, and cried again the whole night. In the morning, my phone rang. It was Rita. I ignored the call, even though I wanted to throw the phone at the wall. I checked on my mom. She was deeply asleep thanks to the morphine. I forced myself to text Rita, saying I was busy with my mom and would call her later after I had eaten and taken a shower. Soon after, hospice nurses arrived. They checked her vitals and told me she likely had less than 48 hours left. I thanked them and went out to the backyard, trying to keep my sanity in the face of everything that had happened. And what was about to happen? I texted Rita again, saying my mom's condition hadn't changed. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want her anywhere near me. I had to do everything I could to make sure my mom's last moments were as peaceful as possible. The next evening, around 6 p.m., my mom took her final breath. I was sitting by her side, holding her hand as she left this world. The following 3 days were a blur of meeting with the pastor, arranging the church service and funeral. But I couldn't get the image of Rita and Henry out of my head, the way they were going at it while I stood there watching. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I was furious with Rita, but it was Henry's overly friendly attitude when we first met that enraged me even more. If they weren't already sleeping together when I met him, they were definitely planning to. I had to find out who this bastard really was. I hired a private investigator to dig into Henry's past. From the beginning, I had a bad feeling about him. Now I was angry at myself for ignoring my instincts. A week later, a colleague from the law firm I worked at handed me Henry's file. It included photos from his arrests. Now, I've been arrested once myself and done my share of shady things. I've known people who've done horrible stuff, some under the influence, some fully aware. But Henry had a full rap sheet. Multiple DUIs, reckless driving, possession of stolen goods, breaking and entering, drugs. The deeper I went into the file, the worse it got. Turns out Henry was out on parole. He'd been released early after serving 10 years in prison. And when I saw that his charges included sex crimes, I felt physically sick. Rita had betrayed me, and that was bad enough. But realizing she'd exposed me to God knows what from a convicted sexual predator who'd spent years in prison made me want to throw up. I doubted Rita even knew who she was dealing with. She had always been a bit naive and too trusting. It had gotten her into trouble before, but this was a whole new level. I was certain that anyone who knew Henry's past would see him as a disgusting creature who never should have been let out of prison. Still, I had to stay focused on the funeral and hold myself together. Once the funeral was over and everyone had left, I was emotionally shattered. I lay down, trying to sleep. Rita called. She didn't know my mom had died, or that I knew about her cheating and who Henry really was. In the days leading up to me catching them, she'd already started texting and calling much less. When I answered, I faked a cheerful tone, acted like I was happy to hear from her. I didn't let on that I knew anything about what she'd done, or who she'd done it with. I let her talk, listening to her words, fully aware she was lying. I pretended to believe her, even thanked her for the fake sympathy, and said I missed her too. But honestly, at that moment, if she had died, I wouldn't have cared at all. Because of my mother's death, I was granted a few weeks off work. I knew it was over between me and Rita, but I couldn't stop thinking about how cruelly she had treated me, whether intentionally or not. I was glad I found out the truth about her and Henry before things went any further, but I still believed what they did, especially at such a difficult time in my life, was absolutely despicable. I wanted revenge, wanted to destroy their lives completely, in a way they'd never trace back to me. I called HR and filed the necessary paperwork for family leave, officially extending my time off beyond the standard 2 weeks. I wasn't worried about getting fired, but I wanted everything done by the book. I had enough money saved to cover my bills for 6 months or more if it came to that. Taking Henry down would be easy since he was a convicted felon on parole. Even a minor offense could send him straight back to finish his sentence. But I didn't want him just sent back. I wanted new charges added that would make sure he never got out again. I'd met his parole officer several times and knew her well enough to know that if I called her, she'd immediately launch an investigation. With his record, I doubted he had a legal job that could explain a brand new Buick and insurance. One night, I parked on the street near Rita's house in a car she didn't know. Henry's Buick was parked in her driveway. I waited silently. Around 2 a.m., he started the engine and left. I carefully followed, making sure not to reveal myself. It was time to conduct my own investigation. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed him to a rundown house in a rough part of town where Rita lived. I jotted down his license plate and parked farther down the street. For hours, I observed the house. Once I was sure there was no activity, I managed to sleep until 8 a.m. After waking up, I grabbed some breakfast and resumed surveillance. During the day, it became obvious either Henry had a lot of short-term visitors or he was selling drugs. Hours passed, and many of the same people returned for another round, confirming my suspicions. I photographed every arriving car and recorded video. Over the next few days, I showed up around the same time, documenting everything I saw. I printed a photo of a black Escalade with a license plate and handed it to the PI. I told him to write the number down for his own good and explained the vehicle's owner might be a bigger dealer. I made it clear my name should not appear in any reports or legal documents. He agreed. Then I lied, saying our law firm represented someone who might have been set up by the Escalade's owner. The detective understood I could have used lawyers to pull that info through back channels, but he also knew legal favors weren't handed out lightly. He paused, realizing I'd just handed him another promising lead. In 5 days, I'd done more legwork than his whole department had in months, so he happily agreed. 10 minutes later, he returned with a printout showing the name and address of the Escalade's owner. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. We chatted briefly about sports and cars. Then I shook his hand, left the station, and headed home, knowing a judge would soon sign a warrant for Henry's arrest. For the next few days, I stayed out of the way, checking the arrest reports in the local paper from Rita City. One morning, Henry's photo appeared on the front page, shocked and confused as he was led away in handcuffs. Unless the cops made a stupid mistake that let him walk, he was looking at several extra years on top of what he still owed. Sure, a good lawyer might reduce the charges or find a loophole, but I wasn't going to let that happen. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Rita's name lit up on the screen. When I picked up, I faked surprise and joy. Without even saying hello, she demanded to know why I hadn't told her my mom had died. She'd seen the obituary in my city's newspaper. I told her she seemed too busy enjoying life, and I didn't want to burden her with my grief. I immediately asked why she had been so distant lately, barely texting or calling. She quickly changed the subject and asked if we could meet. I put on my happiest voice and told her I missed her too. I suggested dinner at our favorite restaurant in town, and she happily agreed, now that Henry was out of the picture and no longer occupying her time. She was excited to see me again, hoping to fill the void. I arrived for dinner with a smile, hugged her tightly, and suppressed the overwhelming urge to snap her spine. I was surprised she didn't comment when I dodged her kisses. Apparently, she assumed I wasn't in the mood for romance because of my grief. The truth was, I just had a vivid mental image of what her body had been doing recently, and I didn't want to catch any prison germs from Henry. We sat at the bar and ordered 2 drinks from our favorite bartender. He knew us well because we always tipped generously. When our drinks arrived, I excused myself to the bathroom and quickly texted the bartender, "Make my cocktails alcohol-free." Her, double the alcohol. Back at the bar, I sat beside Rita again, chatting about the drinks we used to enjoy but hadn't had in ages. I pretended to search for an exotic cocktail recipe. The bartender came by and asked if we wanted another round. I said we were celebrating a long-awaited reunion after a difficult time and showed him the message on my phone, asking if he knew how to make that drink. He read it, smiled, and nodded. He got the message. I was sure both he and Rita assumed this was the kind of night where she'd get drunk and we'd end up at her place. But I had other plans. Rita soon remarked her drink was strong. I said I could barely taste the alcohol in mine. We ordered a few more rounds. She started to complain that she was really drunk, while I kept acting surprised, saying I felt barely anything. A few hours later, I paid for the dinner and drinks, leaving a generous tip. As we were leaving the restaurant, I faked receiving an important phone call and stepped aside. After the imaginary call, I told Rita I had to return to the city for urgent work. A lawyer from our firm had called about a case scheduled for early morning. I asked her to drive home and wait for me there, promising I'd be back soon. I helped her into her car and watched her leave. Then I immediately called the police and reported a drunk driver leaving the restaurant, asking them to dispatch a patrol ASAP. I got in my car and headed toward Rita's house. About 3 kilometers down the road, just a little over a kilometer from her place, I saw flashing red and blue lights. Slowing down, I spotted Rita's car pulled over by the police. I knew exactly what was happening. She was about to be arrested for driving under the influence. That was the plan. But neither she nor I knew that Henry had been using her car to deliver product to the lower-tier dealers working for him. The police conducted a standard search and found several ounces of drugs hidden under the back seat. I had never intended for Rita to get arrested for possession with intent to distribute. Given the fact that she had given me a spare key to her car the same night she gave me a spare key to her home, I realized just how easily I could have destroyed my own life, too. Neither of them suspected I knew about the affair yet. But later, everything came to light. Update. That same day, when I got home, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered and heard Rita sobbing and trying to explain something. I made her calm down a bit. I was curious to hear exactly what she had to say. She told me she was in jail. I innocently asked where and for what. When she said she'd been arrested for drug possession, I expressed real shock at the accusation. I asked her what she wanted from me. She pleaded for help, asking me to bail her out. I told her that after my mother's death, I couldn't risk my property due to inheritance issues. Of course, I could have easily used my house as collateral, but I saw her drug charge as fair punishment for what she'd done to me. After everything, after who she betrayed me with, she deserved what was coming. I went to her hearing and sat in the back row, hoping not to be noticed. When they brought her into the courtroom, she spotted me. I gave her a confused look, as if I couldn't understand how she could be facing such charges. Of course, I knew everything, but I needed to look completely clueless. When Rita started explaining to the judge that her boyfriend had been arrested for drug trafficking a few days ago and that the drugs were his, the judge wasn't interested in hearing it. Rita turned to me with a look of shame and tears in her eyes, realizing that I knew about the affair. I simply shook my head in disgust as they led her out of the courtroom. She understood then that trying to contact me again would be a terrible mistake. Bail for both of them was set extremely high. Henry pled guilty and waived trial, hoping for leniency, but didn't get any. Rita's trial took place a few weeks later, and she accepted a plea deal. She was sentenced to 4 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. Her career, however, was completely destroyed, and I couldn't have cared less.